That's probably an English teacher's nightmare, but I believe everybody's got their own talents. Even though your English teacher's nightmare doesn't mean you can't be an author.
Welcome to Be Great Today, weekly inspiration to start your week. I am Jonathan Bloom, or Frasley Sparkspan in World of Warcraft. Have you ever wanted to write a book? I know many people who tell me that they wish they could, or that they want to. You might remember Jim York from episode 13, where he talks about how he got a Firetruck to Belize. He also wrote a book with his friend Craig Roberts about their experience growing up. Jim has always told me that he had a book called Bucksnort. I'd always been intending to read their book for a while, but due to reading textbooks, I didn't want to sit down and read a book for fun, where I could be playing World of Warcraft or watching Netflix. I do read books. Just recently, I've been listening to them on Audible while I'm walking or driving. In March, I decided to finally read it on my trip to Colorado. This was a book I read on my flight out to my leadership course capstone, and I could not put it down. I started reading it on my flight to Colorado, and I finished it on my flight back. The description of the book is when two guys from the small town of Bucksnort, Missouri, surprisingly survive their motel room being shot to pieces around them. It launches them into a series of adventures as varied as they are hilarious. As their unknown enemies try to prevent them from disrupting a plan for the destruction of their hometown, the guys, along with their friends, find themselves getting deeper into a plot that they keep foiling, seemingly by stumbling into it. Armed with only urinal cakes, potato gun, and a rickety tube, can they stop the plan for good, or will their enemies ultimately prevail? Here is the interview with Jim York. So Jim, did you go to college for writing?
Short answer, no. To elaborate on that, that's probably an English teacher's nightmare, but I'm a published author.
You have a book that I could not put down when I started reading it. It made the flight go by so fast. I got in there and I was transported to the world of Bucksnort.
It'll do that to you.
When did you decide to turn your life into a book?
I think everybody's got some idea in the back of their head about writing a book or a novel. I was out channel surfing on my radio out in the car one time. I just happened to listen to some lady that I think she'd wrote children's books, and she said, probably one of the most common questions she gets is, well, I've got an idea for a book. What should I do? And she said, write it, put it on paper. I'm like, that sounds incredibly simple, but isn't it the truth? I mean, they haven't created the machine yet where they hook up electrodes to your brain and, out comes your book. Probably the most profound piece of advice I heard, do it.
And that goes back to what you said about not having the credentials or the qualifications to write a book, but you got it done.
Right. It's just like I kind of had this idea. Originally, I thought an idea to do an autobiography, and I started getting a little bit crazy, and I thought, you know what? Maybe it should be loosely based on an autobiography. The things in the book I put on there in the beginning that probably about 70% of that stuff, it really did happen. Definitely took advantage of that artistic license thing, though. Kind of made some good stories of it. A lot of people ask me, how do you come up with this stuff? I say, listen, I'm good, but I'm not that good. This stuff really happened. I just put a spin on it. I remember I got a subscription to Writer's Digest for writers, obviously, or wannabe writers. There's all sorts of, do this, do that, don't do this. The only one article that really stuck with me, somebody said, just do it, forget about the rules, just do it. That's what we did. I wish I could say that Bucksnort was a solo effort. My friend Craig Roberts there, he co-authored it. I basically, grew up with him there in my teen, early 20 years before he joined the Marines. I mean, we're still friends, obviously, but that's when most of the stuff happened. It's loosely based on most of it. I was kind of the creative end of it. I'm the one that came up with these things, put a spin on it, and he was good at wording it. I wish I could say I'd done it myself, but I got to give him the credit. I come up with the crazy ideas, put the spin on things, that he was able to really put them into words. And then, of course, he had to get it professionally edited. So there's kind of three parts to it, but I believe everybody's got their own talents, even though your English teacher's nightmare doesn't mean you can't be an author.
Yeah. And you said along the way, you learned a lot from the experience, that if you had known this is how you write a book, that you might not have done it.
The lady that did the editing for us, this lady out in Tucson, my buddy found, did professionally editing, and she'd been around a while. I think she said she got her career to start working for NBC News during the Kennedy election. So she's definitely been at it for a while. She's edited quite a few books. She said that Bucksnort was one of her top two favorites. And how we did Bucksnort, I guess evidently, is not the way you do it. sort of like bumblebees can't fly, one of my favorite statements. Theoretically, what I did, that you don't do it that way. I said, what do you mean? But I said, well, we didn't sit down and write it from start to finish, sit down. And first of all, I don't know how in the world people wrote novels before they had word processors.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it, because we didn't write it from start to finish. We'd write something, and then I'd think of some crazy event that had happened in my life. I put a spin on it, and that didn't necessarily go where we left off. Like, wait a minute. I would sit back there in chapter 3. We might have been towards the end of the book and added stuff to the middle or the beginning. And it's more like, here's how I say we wrote Bucksnort. The big picture of the story is that my buddy got his cell phone mixed up with a terrorist's cell phones. And it's got incriminating evidence on there. And they think that we're on to them, but we're not. We don't know what we've got. They think we're on to them, and they're trying to kill us because they're basically going to blow up the nuclear power plant they're building in town and create mass havoc, destroy the Midwest, and massive flooding and a nuclear holocaust. And we're just, kind of going through life, doing our things. There are a couple of kids about to graduate from high school. But that's kind of, I call it the frame of the story. The big picture. I don't even know how I come up with that. Some terrorists think that we're on to them and we're not, and they're trying to kill us, and we keep foiling their plans, not even realizing what we're doing. But that was kind of an excuse to get all the crazy little stories in. And that's it starts off with a bang there with our hotel room getting shot up. We just took it from there, worked a whole bunch of crazy little stories in the middle, and ended up with us defeating the terrorists. Along the way, we got to save a president and ride in Marine One and offer to go on tour with some professional wrestlers and all kinds of stuff. Into the career of a career criminal. I don't know what all happened to us. A lot of things.
And what was fun is the way you wrote it, that you could see the big picture, but you kept us in suspense. I felt like I was seeing characters living a life. I really got to know the characters, know like their habits, know who they were. I connected with all the characters in the story, and that was fun. It was like one of those summer movies. I think it's like Stand By Me. The whole thing started because of one thing. Along the way, you got to see the characters grow. And in this story, the characters grew, and you brought out some of like the characters' best and worst qualities through everything.
One thing I definitely got to say, the way I'd best describe Bucksnort, it's a 21st century Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn crossed with Forrest Gump on steroids.
Yes, absolutely. With every project, there are things that don't always go according to plan. Is there something that sticks out to you as something that didn't go the way that you expected?
I can't say it didn't go to plan because we didn't really have a plan. We just did it. There were times we got the writer's block. There were times I might zip out 3 chapters, bang, bang, in a couple of days. And then there's probably times where, 6 months I didn't. Then finally something crazy would happen. I'd say, hey, that could fit in Bucksnort. And it got the juices flowing again. Making an ending to a novel, that's definitely the hardest part. I think like if I were writing, say, about some historical event that happened, just basically narrate it, that'd be easy for me. But with a novel, you do have to be creative, and especially coming to an end with it. We could have gone on forever. That was the hard part, was coming to an end, and you did get writer's block sometimes and trying to get the pieces to fit together. Like I said, evidently the way we did it's not the way it's done. You sit down, you write a book from start to finish, and our editor, she said, no, she never heard of anybody writing a book like that, but she also said it's one of her 2 favorites. I'm like, if it works, don't argue with it.
Absolutely. And found inspiration from life. And that I find fascinating is that you brought in things, you built a story, built a world, but then you made it your own. And you had the structure of it being you and your life, but you modified it to make it fun and exciting.
Right.
I've got a couple questions about Bucksnort, but first, can you read an excerpt from Bucksnort to kind of give people an idea of what they can find in the book?
First of all, just a little background. In the story, I'm the son of a hardware store owner. My dad really did own a hardware store that inspired a lot of this. In the book, I come up with this thing where CJ and I, we were like, getting ready to graduate from high school. We were assigned to do a project on the Cold War. We had gone to an auction, and we bought a trailer and a truck there that you've used at the hardware store. On the way back, we stopped at a farm. Okay, the ride down was uneventful, but got interesting on the way back. We saw an old farmhouse with a huge yard sale sign beckoning us to come check it out. There was not much there that I thought I could not live without. However, CJ found a set of air horns that played Dixie that he was convinced he had to have for the Jeep. As we looked around, I asked the nice old guy who owned the place, what in the world was the big yellow thing that sat there in several pieces? He told us it was an old Cold War air raid siren that he had gotten at a government auction about 20 years ago, and his wife was tired of looking at it. She had told him either it goes or she goes. Well, he said, the little lady can cook, so as they say, if Mama ain't happy, ain't no one happy. So it's got to be gone this week one way or another. One of the classes that CJ and I had together that senior year was an AP American History. The class was studying the Cold War, and a teacher had paired us up to give reports at the end of the year on specific aspects of it. CJ and I had been assigned to do our report on civil defense preparedness. Both of us started thinking on the same frequency when we heard what the thing was. We both were thinking the same thing, that this was a godsend for us. If we could get this thing running, it would be the ultimate supplement to our Cold War report and almost entirely ensure us an A. CJ said, forget the A, just think how many cool points this thing could get us. On top of that, me being somewhat a visionary, I foresaw having the thing on top of the hardware store to announce sales, sort of like the old blue light special. When you hear the siren blow, you know prices are falling would be the catchphrase. I knew Dad would be very hesitant to go for anything like that, which is why I had no intentions of telling him about it until it was done. Grandpa James used to say it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. The old guy saw that we were seriously considering the siren and said, now hold on here a second, boys. As much as I have to get rid of this thing, I don't want to take advantage of you two. This thing will need a lot of work to get it in working order. So unless you know somebody mechanically inclined, which we did, we looked at each other and we could tell what we both thought about Mark. And unless you know someone electronically inclined, we looked at each other and thought about Boots, a friend of ours. And then the old guy goes, and even at that, with as many miscellaneous little parts and pieces as it's going to take to get it fixed up, you just about have to have your own hardware store to get it up and running. I can't recommend you bother with it. When he said that, CJ and I looked at each other again, back and at the old guy, and both said at the same time, we'll take it.
That was great. I loved that chapter. I mean, it sounds like something that would happen. Now, did you actually buy an air raid siren?
No, that was one of the things. I don't know how we come up with that.
I hear there are rumors of a Bucksnort 2.
Yeah, we've promised to have it out by the year 2222. Been working on a few other things, sending Firetrucks to Belize, things like that, and we kind of use the things that really happen, so I kind of have to pick up on some other stuff to put it together. But we've got it. I'm not sure who's trying to kill us or why, but I can tell you there's going to be a little bit of murder and back to Bucksnort and a whole lot of insurance fraud. Just to give you a little spoiler, that the guy that died in the fire at the beginning of the story, that he's probably one of the guys trying to kill us.
Nice.
Yeah, that artistic license is really great when you're writing novels.
Oh, yeah. Where can we get a copy of Bucksnort?
Well, it's available in both print and the electronic edition there on all the major online bookstores. You can get the printed copy there on Amazon. It makes a great gift. Hopefully someday they'll make it into a movie. Might as well dream big. I think it'd make a great movie. I
love the book, and I recommend it to everyone. It's a fun read, and you can actually identify with the characters, and you'll know people who are like the characters. Circling back to about the book being available on digital places, one thing that's interesting is the amount of places that we have available to us to publish things, but yet how many people go ahead and do it. And that's the thing. You've gotten the book published. You have gotten a Firetruck to Belize. You've done so many things. All it takes was just doing it.
Yeah, that would be my main thing. You know what? Just do it. Forget about the credentials. You'll pick those up along the way. Throw out the rules and do it. Yep. I've done it, so I can say that.
Just do it. I love those words. Reminds me of my friend, the Scruffy Druid, who says, do the thing. During the interview, Jim mentioned how their editor praised the book. Here is what is on the print cover of the book. Bucksnort is a swashbuckling tale of a group of unusually creative and adventurous young men in a quintessential, quiet American town. It is one of the best novels that has ever crossed my editorial desk and cannot recommend it highly enough without overdoing it. This editor has been editing for years, loved a book by people who didn't go to college for writing. And as Jim York describes himself,
that's probably an English teacher's nightmare.
Thank you for listening to this week's Be Great Today. You can find the show at be-great.today/44. If this episode has inspired you, and you know someone who can use inspiration on their journey, please share this podcast episode with your friends. Until next week, be awesome. Just do it. Write that book you've been wanting to write. Start that project you've been wanting to start. Just do it.
Want more awesomeness every week? Visit weeklyawesome.com. Weekly podcasts to make your week better. Remember to smile and be awesome.